at the first one, speak as well as sharing of facts. Don't forget that master key, honoring our spouse. So if you need to borrow this for ceremony at home, bring it back tomorrow and we'll let you borrow that. The master key is mine. All right, we're going to step into my second skill for you. First skill, the master key is honoring our spouse. The second one that we're going to move into is called echo listening. Echo listening. It can be used at any of the 5 levels of communication, but it's most effective at the 3rd level. And then I would suggest that if I had my say, I would say this is going to be the most powerful communication tool that you can use with your spouse. And you can use this at work as well as at home. You could use it between the siblings if you wanted to, but this is most effective as Christians talking with your spouse. Using echo listening doesn't cost you a dime, but it does involve time on your part to practice. In the simplest term, what echo listening is stating back to your spouse what you heard in a statement or question. I'll better explain that, but let's look at an example of where something was stated and it was stated different back. We're going to go to Ruth chapter 1, and we're going to read 15 through 16. And as you start turning there, Ruth chapter 1, 15 and 16, if you remember the background, here we have Naomi, who is a Jew, with her husband and 2 sons. They'd gone to Moab to escape a famine in Bethlehem. And while in Moab, Naomi's husband and 2 sons died, leaving and grieving Naomi with 2 widowed daughters-in-law. It was interesting in the conversations that I had with a few already, we already have country differences in your marriages. So it was interesting as we're looking back at Ruth here. Ruth was married to someone from another country. There were already conflicts that they had between each other, and we're going to find out that Naomi made an assumption about Ruth as well. So let's look at this about the conversation with Ruth and Naomi. Ruth 1, 15 and 16. And she said, "Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law." And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God." So here, people, and thy God my God. So here, as I stated earlier, the simplest terms of echo listening is repeating back what you heard. So what Naomi said was that she should go back and be like her sister-in-law, go to the gods of Moab. What Ruth heard was, you don't think God is my God. You think I ought to be back in this country. And so she stated it in her own words back to Naomi. Don't tell me what we will have this later in discussion. Don't tell me what I was thinking. We had Ruth who wanted to go back. She was one who followed God. And what she heard from Naomi is, no, you're not, you wouldn't even want to go back with me. But that wasn't at all what it was. Ruth echoed back what she heard, and she stated back in her own statement. An example of echo listening is the simplest one I can think of, and I understand there's not very many of them here, but if you have a Burger King or a drive-through, think of what you do when you do a drive-through. You pull up to the little kiosk and you state what you want. They're going to tell you back what they heard. And if they didn't get it right, you fix it. And then they echo it back. And then you come to an agreement. Yeah, that's what I ordered. And then they're going to tell you you spend too much money. So they're going to have to charge you as you go through there. So I thought I would give, as best I could, an example of what that would sound like. So we'll see if the sound in here is sufficient for that. So imagine that I am going to go in for my order, and listen real careful to see if you pick up the error that is heard here. So we'll give this a try. "I would like a Whopper meal supersized and the Impossible Whopper with a bottle of water. No pickles on the regular Whopper and no onions on the Impossible Whopper. I'd like a raspberry iced tea and a bottle of water." So that's what I ordered. Well, let's see what they said that I was actually ordering. Oops, there we go.
"Okay, got a little Whopper with no pickles and no onions, and a pasta Whopper with
Did anybody catch the misses? Yeah, you're right. So we'll go through this another time then. I think Barb and I did this right. So what you have, when you first do your echo, you have an opportunity to correct what was heard. No, that's not correct. The Whopper needs onions, the raspberry iced tea should be a large, and I only need 1 bottle of water. And then if you get it right,
let me try that again. 1 Whopper with no pickles, 1 Impossible Whopper with no onions, 1 large fry, 1 large raspberry iced tea, and 1 bottle of water. Is there anything else that I can get you?
So at that point I said, that's exactly what I wanted. And if you think about when you make the order, I don't know if anybody's working fast food, they have a computer that they're touching to put the, and it's not in the order that you say it. So they're busy trying to push the button and they read it back in their order. So in echo listening, that's the whole idea behind echo listening. I state something, gotta be careful, Beth will get it. I state something and Barbara then states what she heard. And then I said, well, that's not what I said. Oh yeah, it is what I said, but that's not what she heard. And that's what we're gonna be spending some time looking at here in the differences that we would have between each other and talking like that. You know, the other thing though, about when you go through the order, it's not restating their opinion. If I say something, Barb doesn't give her opinion what I should have said. Can you imagine if I went to make that special order and I got this as a response? Sir, were you aware that your Whopper and fries has almost 60 grams of fat and almost 1,100 calories? If you continue to order supersized fries, your arteries will probably clog in your 60s and you'll probably die of a heart attack by 70. Maybe you ought to try the garden salad. So think of it as a humor point, but how many times do we do that to our spouse? They say something to us, and then we have, what they're giving their opinion, you give yours right back. Well, this is the crux of echo listening. You let your spouse say their opinion. You don't try to fix it. You let them state their opinion, their expectation, their concerns. You know, another one could have happened in the echo listening, and I don't think, yeah, I did put it in here. What happened if they said this? Sir, the cooking team doesn't like packing those Whoppers into little cardboard boxes and trying to stuff them into a paper bag for carryouts. Could you please try something else? Again, you don't try to fix your spouse and what they're ordering here. So, but as we press forward, I have a twofold purpose here in emphasizing this echo listening. Learning how to use echo listening will provide you with a tool for entering the deepest level of communication because it's going to allow your spouse to say what they want. And it's not fixing it. It's allowing them to express themselves for what they have at this conflict. And then I also believe it will enrich your marriage if you can take the time to learn how to echo, listen back and forth with each other. So we have an outline that we're going to follow in here. There's going to be 3 steps that we're going to look at. First of all, we're going to try to learn what it's like to be that customer to make the order. And then you're going to learn how to be the listener. How am I supposed to, or how should I be a listener? And then we're going to look for how to resolve then differences. If we have a good listener, we have a good speaker, how do then we resolve differences here at the conflict barrier? So step 1 is learning how to be a better customer. And although you likely have been customer, for us in the States, we do it all the time. I always explain to Barbara, this is my opportunity to practice echo listening. I'm going to Burger King, or I'm going to McDonald's, or I've got to practice my echo listening skills again. So it's an excuse you can give with your spouse, especially if you don't get the order right and you're bringing it home. So, but first of all, in almost all these transactions, especially in a business, you need to communicate a message. What is it that you want? What is it that I'm trying to communicate to my spouse? And it isn't a silent movie. Can you imagine if I were to pull up the kiosk and I just sit there? Pretty soon they're going to come, sir, can I help you? Oh, yeah, I have something I have to say. I have something to communicate. So that's a key point. This is more than just looking at your spouse and staring at them. Yeah, you might have a concern. You might see it in your spouse. Your spouse is just sitting there. Now, okay, so what did I do now? What mistake did I get? Honey, help me here. What did I just do? And that might be the start of a good echo listening exchange. But there's some rules, though, as a speaker that we go through. And we'll look at it first from a scriptural point of view. James 1, verse 19. James 1, verse 19. Got to get there. James 1, verse 19. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. And I put it this way, when you're deciding whether you're going to be the speaker in an echo listening or the listener, the Lord gave you one mouth and two ears. It's very important to maybe consider that in proportion. Maybe I ought to speak half the time and listen twice as much. So when you're going through the echo listening, be really attentive to be more listening. And I didn't need that in my kit bag. You got them. You got two ears and you got one mouth. So look at that as a percentage. I want to be listening twice as much as I am talking. But who gets to be that customer first? If you have an issue that you're trying to resolve at the conflict, who gets to talk first? That's where we go back to our master key, honoring. Maybe I shouldn't be the first one to say something. I will honor my spouse, and I'll give my spouse that first opportunity to speak when we have something that has to be resolved between each other. So in these, being a customer, I also have, I call them sub-rules here, rules that we're going to look at here for how to be a better customer. The first one as a speaker is to express feelings in I statements. It's all about me. And it seems like it shouldn't be this way, that it shouldn't be all about me, but this is what the issue is. I have something I want to communicate to my spouse. So I have to put it in my perspective of I statements. The reason I do that is if I start using you statements, you made me so mad. I chose to be mad in a situation. So I have to express it in my opinion. My wife might have done something, or someone might have done something, and then I will say, you have done this, but I responded, and it may not have been right, but I did, and then you explain it in I terms in trying to do it that way. Let's say, do you have traffic alerts on the motorway? If there's a wreck, do you get an alert that there's a backup? Okay, so we have the same kind of thing in the States. So let's say I'm delayed in coming home, and Barb's at home waiting for me to come, and I have my cell phone, but I don't cell phone any kind of message. I'm just late, and I'm late, and I'm stuck on your equivalent of the motorway. So you might say in a situation like this, you walk in the door and your spouse might say, I was scared for your safety when I heard about an accident on the motorway and was left wondering, could it be you that was hurt? The longer your delay getting home, the more anxious I got. So the terms are, I was anxious, I was concerned, and you state it in your terms there. What you don't do is tell your spouse what they are thinking. It's so easy to do that. Well, if you did, and then you lay out what you were thinking. The longer you're married, you're going to find this is more of a concern, because you do start figuring out your spouse, and you do start filling in the blanks. They start a sentence and you finish it for them. Well, no, let them get the whole sentence out. Maybe they're going to change what they're trying to communicate to you. So you don't tell your spouse what they're thinking. And the second one, watch out for absolutes. The only place that I believe absolutes are absolutes, right here. Because when your spouse uses an absolute with you and you know you're a sinner, it doesn't take much to say, oh, there's one exception, wasn't an absolute, doesn't apply. So let's say, you always do this. Well, I got one time I didn't, so doesn't apply anymore. Your statement doesn't apply. So be careful with absolutes. So what are those absolutes? You always, you never. Those are terms to watch out in using in your conversations with your spouse. Those are ones to set aside as Jesus never fails. God is always faithful. This is where we can have our absolutes, but be very, very, very careful in using absolutes with your spouse. Now, what is one good one that you should have, and Barbara and I did this when we were first married? I will never consider divorce. That's a good absolute to keep. That's one that we're going to have conflicts, we're going to have some concerns, but we will never consider divorce. And so that is one good absolute that you can keep. Let's see. There are 4 parts to good I statements that I'll leave with you. You have the who, what, when, and you could throw where in there, but who, what, when, and how. So the who is normally, this is yourself. When you're the customer, this is all about me. I hate to word it that way because it sounds really selfish, but you're trying to communicate something from your perspective. So it is about you, the who. And then what? What is it that you're feeling? What is it that's bothering you? What that you want to communicate to your spouse? And then Put the when or the where. What were the details that caused it? So if I was late coming home in traffic and I didn't call, that would be the situation. This is the thing that laid the coursework out that caused my concern. And then the how did that affect you? What was it? I got anxious. I got nervous. The kids were irritated. You know, state what the how is so that you go through a complete cycle for it. But I'll repeat the example, or I'll take the example that I had and then I'll put those 4 parts in there. So when I read it earlier, I was scared for your safety when I heard about an accident on the motorway and was left wondering, could it be you that was hurt? So the who is I, it's all about me in this situation. And the what, she was scared for her safety, and then, or for his safety, excuse me. And the when was when she heard about an accident on the motorway, and then the how, the more anxious I got. So it's much easier to talk it through real quick than try to explain it. It's so much easier to say, just get the 4 parts of a conversation that you have in there. And again, the emphasis is on your own feelings. This is not, you caused me to be anxious. No, I chose to be, but at least I'm going to explain to you why. And so maybe the next time that I go on travel and I'm delayed in coming back, I learn my lesson. Barb gets concerned in these situations. I will make a phone call. I will make a text. I'm stuck in traffic. I don't know if you get a ticket for using your cell phones, but I assume almost everybody has cell phones. My young married class, there isn't anybody who doesn't, so I'm making big assumptions there. But it's a communication tool that we still use. Okay, rule number 2. Focus on what's happening on yourself and don't try to focus blame on someone else. Take full responsibility for your own feelings and needs. What is a good example of someone who wouldn't take that on themselves? Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. I think you're going to hear a familiar story here. Genesis chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. And the man said, the woman. You know, I say anymore, you know, he was quickly to put a blame. And the man said, the woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. So here we have an example. Instead of putting it in their own terms, they were accusing, they were putting it to somebody else. So neither Adam and Eve chose to accept the responsibility for their own, not only sin, but their own perspective of things in this communication that they had. So the wrong way to express yourself as a customer is to say, you make me so mad. No, we choose to make ourselves mad. What are the trigger points, though? I may learn if you have a bad exchange of communication and your spouse has said that, you make me so mad. Okay, maybe that wasn't the right way to do echo listening, but I hope I'm still learning a lesson. What did I do to cause that trigger? Now, if she put it in her own terms, Ron, this is what happened, and I got mad, and I know I shouldn't have been, but it was because of this situation. Oh, okay, I can learn from that, and I can learn not to repeat that again with my spouse. So the correct way to focus on your feelings would be to say, when you do such and such, I let your actions get under my skin, and this happens. As I said earlier, men, we're going to figure out our wives have their cycle in a month. Throw in sick kids, throw in no sleep, throw in a tough job, and now all of a sudden you have a new mixture that you get to deal with in communication. You know, what you didn't think would upset your spouse, now all of a sudden has, because the kids have just worn you down and you're all tired. So those are other parts that come into the emotions that we try to control. But when it happens, we also learn how to say, honey, I'm sorry, would you forgive? That's a great way to restart a goof up when you're communicating. The third rule, you avoid condemnation. If you want to establish a ground rule on echo listening with your spouse, one to consider would be to agree to avoid condemning each other in words or actions. You probably can see this rule more than hear it. For example, if your spouse is talking to you about the budget and we're talking about I got to talk to my wife here because I don't want to get any men in trouble here. So I'm talking to my wife about budgeting, and she says, I just don't understand. I roll my eyes. I didn't say a thing, did I? But boy, did I communicate something to her. Like, what do you mean you don't understand? I wrote the budget. It's 300 lines long, and you should be able to understand the budget. So it worked for me. I'm the engineer. I'm the guy with all the numbers. Barb said, give me a category. Food, entertainment, clothing. Oh, well, okay, now we got it simple. But did you know that I want to have my clothes and her clothes and the kids' clothes? And so I had to learn how to readjust my budget for the sake of my wife who would understand. But your role is to express your thoughts and emotions in word pictures. And don't predict what your spouse is thinking. You don't tell them what they're thinking. Rule number 4 is use bite-sized thoughts. If you're going to have echo listening with your spouse and you've got a big issue you want to talk to them, don't dump it all on them in 10 minutes and then take a breath and then go in for another 10 minutes. Sometimes you just got to break it up in little pieces. Pastor Dan here is in communications, I believe, as well, in the Marine Corps time. We used to call it constant key. Someone would get on a radio and they would put on the transmit and they would talk and they would talk and they would talk. And you can't get a thing back through them. And so you have to teach Marines, you say something, you let go of the receiver. You say something, you let go of the receiver so that someone else can get a word back that, no, you're an idiot, stop squeezing that microphone. But we have the same thing with you talking with your spouse. If Barb has something that's really important that I have to understand, and she starts into it, sometimes we refer to it, she takes a right turn and you didn't turn on the turn signal. And so I have to stop and say, whoa, let me try to echo back what I just heard on the first part. This is what I heard. Oh, nope, that's not what I was saying. Okay, let's get that first in that little bit. Let's get those bits taken care of without doing a long sermon and expect someone to then repeat what you have said in that time. And then one of the other aspects of this communicate, what I'm trying to get to my wife, I want for her to understand my perspective. I want her to understand that when we're going through the idea is that she gets my order right. She understands what I'm trying to communicate with her. And it would be embarrassing. I use that word. Actually, it's embarrassing is probably not the right word. It would be a really tough situation if I can order a McDonald's meal better than I can echo listen with my wife. They give me a chance at the speaker to get things right. I need to give the same to my wife. I have something I want to say, hon. This is what I want to communicate with you. Would you tell me back what you just heard? And we'll get into this a little bit more, but I'm an engineer. She is not. She's good in the kitchen. I boil water. That's about all I can say in the kitchen. So when we speak, we're speaking in a different, I'll say different language. The couples that are coming from different countries, you already run into that. What's the common language that you're going to have between each other? And okay, I know because now we're here, it's English. But in communicating, throw in different cultures, throw in different families and backgrounds, and you're going to have a conflict of just that, trying to communicate with each other. That's why I'm going to try to express myself best this way and then echo it back for me. Okay, so now how do you become the better listener on this side? The first part that we want to look at is learning how to be that better associate or someone who's the listener. Like I said, I'm an engineer, and my example may not fit for everybody to understand, but television, well, matter of fact, what we're broadcasting here, they are taking my sound off of I'll call it hotspot, but the microphone pack here, and they're mixing it right at the camera. And they're putting the two together, and then they go out together. And then when whoever's on the other side, they're going to see a video, and then they're also going to hear an audio. But it's not, they're two separate. And if you've ever been on a TV where they don't have it matched up, and you see the people moving their mouth and their voice doesn't match it up, it just drives you crazy. So, because it's not what you hear. You're hearing me, and you're seeing it all at the same time. But that signal takes a lot of filtering to get there. It's one way to take it here, and then it has to be filtered to put out another way, and then it has to go over either a cable or over the Wi-Fi, and then it's defiltered at the other end for the receiver. But filters can be both good and they can be bad when it comes to relationships between each other. A Bible example of a filter that I thought where a man put up a filter to keep him from hearing from God is in Matthew chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13, verse 14. Matthew 13, verse 14. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see and shall not perceive. Here we have a Bible example of the words are coming out, but they're just not getting it. Their religion was keeping them from hearing the message that the Lord had for communicating. But we too also can have filters. Many of the filters that we create come over time. It can be from our thoughts that we've had in the past. It can be family background. Like I said, I was a Lutheran home. Barbara's in a Catholic home. She grew up in the middle of Minnesota. I grew up down in the southern part of there. In the United States, you get someone who's way down south and marry someone from up north, and you're going to get y'alls and meaning something else, and you'll have that here too. I found out yesterday it was a garage. And no, it's a garage back where, I mean, just how we say things can be different that way as well. Our religious background, our heritage, culture, all have influence on our filters. And through time and adaptation to our past, we learn how to use filters to communicate with each other. I know I have to change how I communicate things with my wife because she is not an engineer in how we speak. So I have it as a visual. I'm a visual kind of guy, like I said. But picture myself. You can see me through here. But if I use my filtering, I can disappear because of filters. My filter may stop me from hearing what my wife has to say because my filters have blackened out what I can hear. So it's if anybody wonders what it is, it's Polaroid film. And if you have Polaroid glasses, you might find that if you see somebody else's eyes, they're going to disappear. Or you can go to the gas station sometimes and you can't read the screen on the gas station because of Polaroid. But the engineer just kicks in once in a while, sorry. There are 4 filters, though, that can keep you from hearing well with your spouse. The first one is inattention. Inattention is a common problem that's especially prevalent today. I asked my young couples this. Instead of my teaching them, I said, what is the biggest problem with keeping the attention of your spouse? Here's what they pulled up. I think if you look on the back of your handout, you have a little, somewhat of a cartoonish, where if you put that cell phone right on your forehead, maybe it'll look like you're really talking to me. So, but distractions come beyond just the cell phone. It can come from a TV if you have it at home, telephones or smartphones. It can be iPads. It could be your school projects. It could be school activities, computers, children's pets, you name it. There can be things that will cause a filter from being able to hear. Some of those same details that keep us from focusing on a conversation that our spouse might have with us, it's those distractions that keep us from getting mentally engaged with them. One of the, if anybody here is into sports and you like watching sports, have someone driving for that goal, and your wife says, "Can I talk to you for a little bit?" Score! No, okay, I'm ready. So I hope I didn't blow Beth out with that one, but that can be a filter that we have as well, is those kind of things that are in the way. And you might see it at work. You're trying to talk to somebody, and you're in the middle of a conversation, they say, huh? What'd you say? It's because we've allowed some distractions. Now, inattention to the person talking prevents a fully engaged conversation. And if I were to be watching TV, Barb, that isn't a good time for us to get into a deep echo listening conversation. We'll have an exchange of words. We're back at the facts level. And so I can do that with her if I'm watching TV, but I can't do a good exchange of information. The second thing for a filter, you can be your emotional status. Like I shared before, lack of sleep, sickness, a long day at work, any number of those things can actually cause a filtering problem in trying to communicate something back and forth. And those factors all have an influence on our emotional state of mind. And like I said, men, figured out your wife's cycle as well, that you could say the same thing 2 different times of the month and get a different response. You just have to be prepared for the understanding that there's that kind of filter that might be out there as well. And then the third one is impatience. I don't know how many years you've had married. Barb and I have been 43 years of marriage already. But do you know what your wife or husband is thinking? Can you finish their sentence for them? I would suggest that is not a good thing to practice. Don't finish their sentences for them. Let them do their thinking, and don't be impatient to then fill in the answer here. By being impatient, what we do is we filter out what the intended communication was. It might be something different that my wife has to say this time, or your husband has to say. So let them finish it. And if I'm slow to finish a sentence, my engineering brain says, okay, here's the first part of the sentence, and then I'll pause, and then I'll finish the rest of the sentence. And what I've done is I've opened the opportunity up for Barb to finish the sentence. And I said, okay, so I've got to work on getting those complete sentences in there so she doesn't have an opportunity to fill them in for me. So, and she knows that now. Maybe it's because we've taught this back and forth with each other, but we have to learn how to wait and let our spouse finish talking as a filter. The fourth one is differences in style. We were talking about this at the dinner table today. I grew up with 7 siblings at the dinner table. And if you wanted the food that was at the other end of the table and the cacophony of all the kids at the table, I don't know how you had developed a soft tone, but, hey, pass the peas, please! You know, if you want to get your tone across, well, bring that into the Marine Corps, and if you're firing a weapon and you want to cease fire, you let everybody know in the firing line, cease fire! Well, the first time I came home and I told my wife, hi, honey, and her hair blew back, and I said, well, you know, I realized, okay, this loud voice that I have from the Johnson side, it doesn't fit in the home. And so I realized I wasn't yelling at her on purpose, but that's the way it came across. So I had a filter that was pushed on her because I had a different style of how I communicated. She's laughing. I caught that one good there. So, so when you can put up filters and you may not even know that, and that's one of the things of why I go over these 4 points. Maybe you do have a filter like that, and maybe you have to adapt. Or now it's oftentimes the filter is how I'm receiving it. Remember, this is how we're talking as a receiver here. So I have to be aware I have a filter. So I might have to decide cell phone is going to be put aside. Okay, honey, I'm ready. Cell phone got put aside and turned off because bzz, bzz, bzz. You know, you want to look at the phone. It's got to be an important message. It was one of the kids telling me about the latest thing they saw on the internet or something, you know. So we've had to learn to put off the phone and set it aside. We had to learn to turn off the TV. If you have children, you're going to learn you have to put them to bed because the kids will find some way to interrupt. There's always something important. You know, my brother beat up on me, or he said a lie to me, or okay, get the kids down, and then you've gotten rid of one of the filters, and then you have an opportunity to then have a better chance of communicating with each other. So try to understand and mitigate filters. And it may not be a perfect way to communicate, but echo listening, I think, can be a good tool for us to learn how to deal with the filters, how to communicate with our spouse. So you got to practice though. And what I would suggest in the practicing is use McDonald's you have to pick a subject that is not necessarily a hot topic, but one that you know you might have a difference between each other. And spend some time practicing the echo listening and working your way through it with a topic that's not necessarily a hot topic. My young married class, a lot of the families are there with their parents. And I said, one of the things I'm trying to teach you guys in there is Christmas. When are they going to tell mom and dad, we're not coming over for Christmas, we're going to have it at our house? Oh, that'll cause a little conflict, especially here in Ireland when they're right here. But the idea is that there's going to have pressures for doing things, but we've got to talk through this, especially a lot of the men have married couples and they brought their wives to Heritage Baptist Church. They would like to go home for Christmas, but every time it goes to the local family. And the discussion has to come up. Can we have a discussion here before we decide we're going to go to your family again for Christmas and Thanksgiving and for Easter? How about, can we have this conversation, maybe my family, or can we have our own? We had the advantage in the military that they took us away from family. And we were in Okinawa, Japan, and there was no way to go home for Christmas. And so we learned to make our own unit family. As a personal note, and I'm done with this one, we'll have a break here in a second, is how do I do that with my own children? How can I give them that same freedom? And it's hard when you have 17 grandchildren that you'd like to visit with, but a willingness that God gave us our ability to be alone in our own unit. And so we've had to do that with our 4 children. And that one's a free one. That one's not in my lesson here, but it's something we have there. So time for a break. Well, I'm glad I put a lot of things in the handout because I won't have time to necessarily hit all these on the last page here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just hit the bullets of those, hit a couple of key points, and then I want to get to that step 3, how to resolve differences. Because I hate to set you all up for great communications and then, what was the value of this? Well, there is a value that we're going to try to get to. So when you work in echo listening, it's good to understand how you can discover what your spouse is trying to give to you. I call them discovery tools. The first discovery tool is to learn how to focus on your spouse. How do you focus on your spouse? Look at them. Don't spend the time looking outside. Yeah, keep talking, hon. Yeah. How does she know that you're communicating? If you got to do the eye contact with your spouse. And so use and concentrate on your spouse. One of the other things that I would suggest is have an open posture. Yeah, I'm listening. Tell me everything you got to know. You know, I'm listening. So watch your visuals that you provide your spouse, and then provide feedback while they're talking. If you just sit there silently, I'm not saying you interrupt them, but just, I think I got it. Sometimes you have to call a timeout. I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you back up and say that again? My filters completely block this message out. So sometimes you have to provide that. And one of the other things, especially when it's a tough thing to talk about, get close enough to maybe just hold their hand while you're talking. And it's a touch. One of the things that I emphasize to especially the young marrieds, don't make it a sexual touch. You know, don't have a hand that implies something else. Just hold their hand, or put your arm on them, or put your hand on leg. Something that you're communicating that I've got this. You've got my full attention. And then set the scene. I've already talked about that. If you got kids, it's time to put them to bed. You're 5 minutes away from church. That isn't the time to say, I got a big subject we want to talk about. You know, save it for a time that's appropriate. So, the second discovery, though, the second discovery tool is to summarize your spouse. I had a Bible example of Nicodemus. I won't read it for the sake of time, but if you recall, Jesus said to him, you must be born again. He said, what? Do I have to enter my mom's womb once? No. You missed the point. And so that was an exchange that they had between each other where there was an opportunity to find out what was the true essence of what you're trying to say. Well, you have to be born again spiritually. But it's the true essence of echo listening is learning how to state it in your own words. You reword this. Unless you and your wife can use those same words and say, I got it. But there's times that I just have to speak it back in engineering speak. And she can then say, well, your engineering has just filtered you out what the message was. So and I don't know what it is between you. Whatever your filters are, you have to learn how to repeat back and reword it in ways that your spouse understands. And interrupt if you need to, call a timeout and say, hey, let's go back through one more time. But then also be prepared for a negative response. My wife has something that she has to say that I have been irritating her in some subject. Do you know how hard that is for a man who's lived with his wife for 43 years and now he just discovered I've been irritating her? Pride will get in the way. Pride will say, well, it's not my fault, it's yours. Get over it. No, that's not taking the idea behind echo listening. The idea is she has a concern she's trying to express to me. And in her concern, I need to be prepared for that negative response that I would have and temper myself in not responding in a loud response to that as well. And then this third discovery tool is invite your spouse to say more. You know, she may be going along or he may be going along and sharing something, and they pause for a second. That's not a time to jump in and then share all your words. It's, honey, do you have more? And then just be prepared. You may have to take notes. It may be one of those long sessions. You're just going to have to take notes and then talk through these things later. But be prepared to go for the long and then interrupt if needed. To invite to say more for your spouse. I had a Bible example in there. And then the next part of echo listening, though, is to ask questions. If you're trying to repeat back to your spouse what they're communicating to you, ask them questions. I have no idea that I was doing, what can I do, or what did I say, or what triggered this. Ask questions to allow them to fill in more in your discussions back and forth with each other. Okay. The flow that I have in there, I could try to explain that, but I think it's almost self-explanatory. When I said decide the roles, it was who's going to be the speaker first. Who's going to be the listener? Decide those roles, and then reach out to your spouse. Let's say, and Barb, I have to be very careful. She's told me some subjects do not bring up in the group here, so I think I'm learning those yet. But a lot of this is, if I did this, and Barb would say, we don't do that. We don't fight. We don't argue. We have learned to use echo listening, but whew, I can get myself in trouble here already. Anyways, the listener reaches out to the speaker and say, "Hun, I think you might be upset with me. You haven't spoken to me in 2 days, and maybe I've really done something that irritates you." We haven't done that. We have not done that, gone 2 days. But if your spouse is noticeably different in conversing with you, ask, is there something I've done? So you've given them an open door. Hey, I'm ready to listen. What is it that I may have done? They express their feelings. Again, speak in the small bites that I shared that, and then paraphrase back what you heard, and then switch roles, because now it's your turn. Okay, this is what I have on this same subject, and it may be budgeting. That's, like I said, this is the biggest thing that the young couples deal with, is how do we afford housing around here? I would guess it's probably similar to what you face here, but our couples are looking at almost 50% of their income is going to housing. I don't know if it's that bad here as well. But when you have that, what else is affected? Well, all those fun dates that they were going on when mom and dad were paying for the rent on the car or whatever it was, now all of a sudden it's out of their own budget. They don't have the money to do that anymore. And that's a friction right away. We used to take me out every week, and now we don't have enough money to even go to McDonald's once a month. And how do you talk through that? It's a reality that you have to work through when you're dealing here. And that's why you switch roles to communicate back and forth. And then this is one that I had to solve, or not solve, I had to deal with. Barb would love to explain to what was going on in her life. I'm the engineer. I have a solution for her. And so she would explain all these things, and she said, Ron, I just wanted you to listen. When I last brought that up in our Sunday school class, I have someone who's covering for me in the next 2 weeks, Marcus. And Marcus said, well, then why am I in this conversation if you don't want me to answer the question? You wouldn't believe how many ladies had him. They went after him. So men, sometimes we just have to have an open ear. And I had to learn I'm not solving her problem. Sometimes her just talking it out solves the problem by itself. And so I had to learn how to just listen. And sometimes in echo listening, that's the best thing you can do, is just listen. Hold their hand. Be sympathetic. Not fix, yeah. If it doesn't need to be fixed, don't fix it. So, or even if it does need to be fixed, maybe it's best that you don't try to. And then sometimes you have to take time out. Sometimes it just might get overwhelming. I'm overloaded. Can we come back and let's do this tomorrow or the day after? And let me think on this one a little while. So that was a real quick through the flow, because I wanted to get to that step 3. The step 3 is resolving differences themselves. Make sure I get my sheet here to that. Learning how to resolve differences or conflicts. What we get from echo listening is the benefit of listening, and then assume that you have a conflict that needs to be resolved. The two of you need to agree to a period for it. Sit down and have a conversation. And then the what now? What do we do when you finish your echo listening? And in the business world, we would call it a win-win situation. The idea is I'm not going to be the victor and she's going to be the loser. It's not going to be she gets her way and I don't have a say. It's what can we work together through this? And like I said, budgeting is one of those items. We have to learn to live with this together. So we'll make a decision and then we will work with it together that way. And I don't know how many cycles you've had to go through for budgeting. We redo ours probably 3 times a year. As soon as you establish it, the taxes go up. As soon as you establish it, the gas prices go up. You go into COVID and everything falls apart, So you have to make some adjustments, but we had to work through that together and have a give and take to say, this is what we need to do. We have to learn to live with it that way. So in a win-win situation, you don't have a winner and you don't have a loser, and it might involve compromise. I know that's a tough word in independent Baptist churches, and we're not talking about a doctrinal compromise, but it's, do I have to have my way all the time? No, there are times I need to, okay, I've had with echo listening, I'm understanding my wife's point of view now. And so now I need to, okay, we don't have to do it my way. Maybe we can do something together. Maybe we can decide that this is an alternative to do something. But we thoroughly discuss a subject, and then each of us, we have our turn to speak as well as to listen. And then sometimes you stumble across it. That's what's, I call it the eureka moment. You know, you're going through and all of a sudden, the glimpse of the obvious of how to solve something. But what you can focus on when you look for this win-win solution is first you got to complete that echo listening cycle, and then there's no my way or the highway. A phrase that maybe not applying here, but certainly back in the States you'd hear people say that. You try to find something that would work as a possible solution for everybody. Some may call it brainstorming. If you have it, and again, write down ideas if it's something that has to be resolved between the two of you and you're writing something down. One of the things you have to be careful is there's no such thing as a stupid idea. If you want to squash an opportunity to have a win-win situation, is your wife has shared something with you or your husband has shared something with you, well, that's stupid. Well, there goes echo listening. You're going to have to go back and have some forgiveness time and try this process all over again because you just threw in some words that were not absolute, but they sure were cutting. It was not an honoring statement that you had made. So you may have to write down your ideas, and then what we have as an advantage over anything else in the world is we have an eternal Father who is willing to listen to us and say, Lord, we can't figure this out between us. Lord, would you give us a solution that we can get from your word, from other counsel or otherwise? So it's one of those exciting things about being a Christian. We have a power of prayer that the world does not have. Take full advantage of that when we're trying to solve differences between each other. And then at some point you got to make a choice how we're going to resolve the difference we've been talking about. And when you do, you may find out that it doesn't work. And again, I've said this before, budgeting is often the issue. You name your topic though, but that one's an easy one to address. And you got to come back to the echo chamber. We got to do this again. It just didn't work. Or maybe it was how to deal with the children. How do you raise children? Coming from different cultures, different countries, how you raise your children. Like I said, I learned from my dad. It wasn't a good learning tool. My dad was very hard. And if I did that, or if Barb realized I'm doing it my way and she doesn't even have a say, we have two different families that brought up. Our Bible was the answer. And we kept going back to this. Okay, did our parents do it right? No. How should we do it? This is the way we always went to the answer here. Praise the Lord for that. Instead of saying, okay, we need to go to a counselor and try to win the counselor's ear so that he sides with me, and then I get, no, let's go back to God's Word. I don't know if Patch the Pirate is big overseas or not. Barb and I grew up with Ron Hamilton's Patch the Pirate. And how is it that we taught our kids to do things? Finish the job, then have fun. Finish the job, then have fun. When you have a job to do, work until you're sure it's through. Oh, hey, we're going to teach our kids some songs, and we're going to teach them how to clean up after themselves. You know, the pigsty, they sing about all these things, but he bases it on Bible principles for his songs. And so that's what we had to do. We went to the Bible, we went and got some good scriptural songs that we could teach the kids as well. And then, as I said, the prayer is that big value added. Barb and I didn't learn how to do echo listening until we were in our 30s. I don't know how we made it through our 20s. That's when we had all our children, but the Lord blessed us. We had a heart's desire to still serve the Lord in all that we did. And I truly believe that echo listening is the best tool that we've got in my kit bag, and we'll pull it out. We frequently do that, and Barb and I will sit. Now, I told you to hold hands. I'm old enough now, I've got arthritis in my neck, so I can't have Barb sit next to me and I look at her, because pretty soon I say, I'm stuck. And so we sit kitty corner from each other, and so we can look at each other now. But the intent is there. Our hearts are longing to hold each other's hands but we've adapted over time. We still use echo listening, and it's a tool that we have been blessed with by the Lord. So that's it for today. Tomorrow I'll have a different subject for you. Lord willing.